Alright, hello everybody. We're going to talk about barrel bedding for the No1 Mk3. But my facilities here aren't the greatest, so what I'm going to do is talk about some of the options that target shooters developed way back in the 20s and 30s that worked really well for them. And this is featured on a page in my book, and I'll run through them and hopefully you can see enough detail here. Now, the very top one is the standard bedding that No1 Mk3 has. There's a contact point here where the reinforced contacts the wood and the nocks form. Here's the part where the main screw comes through. Now all No1 Enfields are floated from the reinforce up to that funny little band that sort of drifts around on the barrel underneath the woodwork, and it's just a ½ inch or so behind the band that, on the outside, that clamps the handguards on. So all of these are floated. The first 12 inches of a No1 Mk3 have no contact with the wood whatsoever. The differences all become in restraining the thinner and flexier upper end of the barrel from the mid-band forward. Now in the stock Enfield, it rests lightly along the fore-end channel. Just rests there. There's no particular pressure up or either onto the wood or off the wood. When the nose cap is pressed on, right at that point there, that little spring and plunger acts through it and forces the front end of the muzzle up about 0.04 of an inch, and that provides the accurate up pressure. So there's very little that the average shooter can do to modify the stock pressure on a Lee Enfield No1 Mk3. The only thing that you really should do is make sure that that spring on that plunger is brand new. Now they're a cheap part, you can buy them from any Enfield place online or on eBay, or go to my website, Enfield Resource. There are sources all over the world for that little screw. They might cost you $5, and for what you get, knowing that your up pressure is accurate, that's a no-brainer. Now these names that have come about on some of these things don't mean much in particular. This next one is called orthodox, but that doesn't mean orthodox as in conventional. It's just a name. It might be from the shooter whose name was Mr. Orthodox. Who knows? So here's what he's done. Normal contact at the reinforce. In the barrel channel, where the barrel normally just rests with no pressure, he has this resting in the channel with some pressure. That's on the No1 Mk3, that's 3 to 5 pounds up pressure. And what he's done is he's put packing material, probably cork, around that channel, so it's contacting right around the sides of the barrel. Now, because the fore-end channel is quite close to the barrel already, that packing that he's put in there is, or the bedding, is only about a 1/16 of an inch thick. It's quite thin, so it's probably just cork sheet. Technically anything will do it. You could do that, you could simulate that with epoxy, which is actually far and away, epoxy is the better surface to use in the fore-end itself, because pressure will compress cork in about 6 months. So if you have a target rifle that's got a bedding with cork or any kind of soft material, you can almost count on the fact that you need to service that constantly to get best accuracy. In the front handguard, he's done the same thing. He's wrapped corking, and in the handguards you always call this packing. Rather, bedding belongs in the fore end, packing in the handguard. So he's wrapped it full away around the barrel, full length of the upper handguard from the mid band to the very front. The variation on the orthodox is the bedding and the packing material has been shortened by 3 or 4 inches, and it's been reduced right down the middle, and he's put a heat groove through there so that any heat build-up can escape. It's not being trapped between the cork and the metal all the time. This heat groove concept is kind of common, shows up in a number of different bedding options, and that's just to offset the degree to which the rifle heats up while you're pinging off your 10 rounds. You don't necessarily want it to get over hot and change all your settings, even though it's probably not addressing an issue of any significance other than for that one purpose. You just don't want it heating up too quick and changing settings faster than you can figure it out. Now Mr. Beaton has got the reinforced contact floated all the way forward to a point halfway between the mid-band and the nose cap, and then he's put a platform here 6 inches wide, same thing, cork wrapped fully around the sides of the barrel, and packing the cork, same thing, fully around the sides of the channel in the handguard, and that's it for him, and it's floated from there forward. There's no plunger or spring on the orthodox methods. Now the Altman method is quite startling because the barrel is fully floated. What he has done though is he's got the standard reinforced bedding here, and then just in front of that he's got a 3 or 4 inch pad of probably epoxy. In his day probably done with wood, but these days certainly with epoxy. And the barrel is fully floated from the rear sight ears, protector ears, all the way forward. Now for a fully floating barrel, that's quite a startling thing to do, considering this is a rifle that everyone knows has a flexible barrel. But it worked for Mr. Altman. He's quite a well-known name in target shooting days, so something to think about. Mr. Pittman, similar deal. Standard contact at the reinforce, and then he puts a very reduced bearing area right here where the mid-band goes, just 1 inch wide, and it wraps fully around the sides of the barrel and around the top in the handguard. And then from there forward is fully floating. Now the thing to remember if you're considering altering the barrel bedding on an Enfield is, back in the day, this rifle was somewhat controversial for its accuracy and lack thereof, and they spent enormous government resources trying every option to get No1 Mk3 more accurate. And that's where, for instance, that little floating band is that drifts around inside your woodwork. And it doesn't seem to fix to the barrel, but has a little gap all the way around it. And that is a harmonic vibration dampener, which comes into play when the barrel is flexing. And you can have a guess at how much the barrel is flexing by how much larger that thing is around the barrel where it sits. It's quite large. So the thing is, standard bedding was arrived at after much experimentation. Don't automatically assume that one of these things is going to get shooting better. I strongly recommend get your stock standard rifle working to the best possible standard you can before you start going down these roads. That way you have a baseline understanding of what you're doing and what you're trying to better. Now, one of the methods that was advanced by Fultons over the years, and Parker Hale and many other private target shooters, they all concentrated on restraining the barrel in this front section from the mid-band forward to the nose. So it's common to find full packing around the barrel here, and sometimes no packing in the handguards, sometimes just a slender line of it, sometimes portions front and back. Now Fultons went one further, and they put this bedding material full length like this. And then in the upper handguard they mounted 3 springs at peculiar intervals right on the harmonic vibration points. And this is one of the most brilliant developments, to my mind, that target shooters came up with. You have this channel restraining the barrel from flopping around in those lower planes, and in the handguard the springs are doing 2 things. They're pushing down into the forearm bedding, so they're behaving like a good quality packing material, and then additionally they're working directly on the harmonic vibration points to steady the vibrations down. So that's a highly tuned setup and extremely logical when you think about it. Now for Fultons, that produced great results, and they did that design on their rifle for decades, until, in fact, easily until the number 4 Enfield came along. So there's my thoughts on barrel bedding. You've got options. The barrel is flexible. It is something that needs to be addressed to get best accuracy out of an Enfield. You can experiment with some of these things with cork by just pushing cork packing into the barrel channel and not fastening it in place. You can just have it resting in there. So you can experiment and see what gives you best accuracy, and then just pull it out if you don't like it. Yeah, and you've altered nothing. But my major recommendation is, if you have a stock standard rifle, go through that with a fine-tooth comb and set it up precisely the way the factory recommended it. Now on a No1 Mk3, you're talking a 2 to 4 inch MOA, 2 to 4 inch circle at 100 yards. That's 2 to 4 minutes of angle. That's pretty darn good. I mean, when you start to see your targets generating that, you'll be. I'm pleased when I see my rifle shooting at that degree of accuracy. So it's well worth tuning up your rifle, getting it first, and then thinking about the stuff afterwards. By then you'll be starting to think like a gunsmith. And you might give up on the barrel beading and come back and tweak things under the handguard instead, and leave the barrel beading as Mr. Enfield's came up with. But anyway, there you go. There's a few thoughts on Enfield beading. It's very well explored in my book. We've got, let's see if I can keep this all working. We've got lots of examples with targets with different methods. There's the Fulton's case study with the springs, showing the actual positions and photographs of what they look like in the spring rifle. This rifle is making 1 to 2 inch circles at 100 yards, and it needs work. It's been deliberately not brought up to a modern standard. It's aged. The wood has got some curves in it and things like that. So in a very worn rifle, let's say, it's making 2 inch circles at 100 yards, which is not bad. It's certainly going in the right direction. In fact, out of a circle of 5, I can see here I've got three shots are inside a 1 inch circle, and all shots are within a 2 inch circle. So that's pretty darn good. But there you go, there's a good photograph. There's a little bit of packing in the very fore end of the handguard at the muzzle, just 2 inches long. There's a spring right behind it. Then there's another spring, then there's another spring. And then there's your cork packing, cork beading in the main channel. So that's it, a few thoughts.